Something that I valued in Tori's teaching throughout the book was the conversations that she had with her students. When she would sit down with them and they would talk about feelings, or they would problem solve, or they would talk about suggestions for their classroom, or they would talk about how they feel with each other. I think that was really powerful, and I think that it's something that we should learn to add into our classrooms, in maybe not the way that she did it, but in some way, to just have an emotional check-in with our students, to make it a place where it's open to talk about how we're feeling, to talk about tough issues like things that happened at the end of the book that were really hard, but still to try to be able to discuss those with students, to have limits set on where to go, so be able to let the students lead the conversations. Something in this book that made me think and ask questions was the chapter that talked about when Sheila was getting all of the tests done and getting her IQ scores back, and how they were really high. She was a 182, and that's literally an unheard of IQ, but she is scared of paper. She won't write things. So there's no way that other teachers can see this knowledge that she has. And that chapter ends with, "A mind is a terrible thing to waste." And that just really has brought up questions for me of what is wasting a mind, and what is the proper way to use it, and how do we measure learning if this child is learning but it's not proven in day to day. Like, is she wasting her mind? Is she not? How do we break through to show that she is using her mind and it is a beautiful thing? How can we break through the problems that she's having so that we can start building on that higher level thinking and start building upon the beautiful mind that she has, so that it's not something that's wasted? One thing in this book that just displayed the importance of teaching to me was the relationship that Sheila and Tori had, that she was the one trusted adult in her life that she felt loved by and cared for. And one of the passages in the book that just describes this is when she gives Sheila hair clips and she says, "Why are you being nice to me? No one's been nice to me before. No one's been nice to me on purpose." And just that, it's really saddening that no one had ever treated her this way before, that treated her with love and respect and kindness. And as teachers, we have that role to show our students that love and respect and kindness. And we have that role to see their potential, because no one else saw the potential in this girl at the beginning of the book. And Tori even had a hard time seeing it herself sometimes, of how she was going to get past the things that were going on. And I think that is so important, to just be that one trusted adult in a student's life when there's so many hard things going on, that there is someone that they can count on and trust. Some practical advice that I learned from this book is setting boundaries and having clear expectations for students. And even though Tori did get really attached to her students, and sometimes I don't know if I think my boundaries would have been the same, she did do a good job of letting Sheila know how her classroom runs and what was allowed and what was not. An example of that is in the middle of the book, she is throwing blocks across the classroom, and Tori says, "We don't do that here. Like, rules might be one way at home, but the way we do things here is differently." And she taught her how to use the things in the classroom the right way. We don't rip up paper here, and we don't throw blocks here. And these are things that she was doing because of the emotions that she was going through and the struggle that she was going through. But it was also something that needed to be said, and those expectations weren't thrown away just because of who she was. And I think she did a good job of redirecting and just showing her the right way to do things. Like, she took those blocks that Sheila was throwing, she had her count them, and she had her add them and multiply them. And that is where she found out that Sheila is actually really knowledgeable in math and knows a lot more than people expect of her. And I think that is something that is super important, is to expect high things from our students, even when there's not a lot expected from them. Because if she kept letting Sheila throw those blocks across the classroom, she would have never known what she knows. And I think that's advice that we need to have, is to have high expectations for all of our students and to tell them things straight. Like, we don't do that, and this is why, and this is what we need to do. If your student is swearing, say, those aren't words we use in school. This is what we say, and this is why we don't do that. Something that this book made me consider is the background of the students that are coming into our classes and how they act. Sheila was a hard student when she first came to the school, and I think that's something that is hard as a teacher when our students are not easy to love, when they're trying to be unlovable, but to just continue to love them. And something else that she mentioned was that some students are perceived as unteachable, but no student is unteachable or unreachable. And I think that's something that is important to consider, and consider like what our students are going through, where they live, and what they've been through, and all of the things that we might know or we might not know, and just to be able to love our students no matter what they have gone through, to just come each day with a fresh slate. And when things happen, like when Sheila threw the blocks around the room, where she poked out one of the fish's eyes, like those are hard things to do, and they make it feel like the student is so hard to love at that moment. But just to continue to come back with grace each day to teach and love the students, in that building resiliency as a teacher and learning to build compassion for people that are hard to have compassion for or have empathy for, is so important. And we talk all the time about having resilience for our students and teaching them resiliency, but that's something that we need to be teaching ourselves every day too, is learning how to continue to push on when things are hard, because teaching is something that is going to be hard and not always be easy, but we need to come up with new ideas and be creative and be curious on what is going on in our students' lives. Something that surprised me in this book was Sheila's capacity for joy. Tori tells us a story about how it's March and the flowers are blooming, and Sheila sees a daffodil for the first time, and she's just overwhelmed with joy and curiosity, and she wants to hug the daffodil. She thinks they're so pretty, and she's so happy to see them. She asks if they're fake. She finds out they're real, and she is just enamored by the beauty of this plant. And something that I think is so amazing is, even in the midst of all this tragedy, there is still such a great capacity for joy. And Tori says that Sheila was never far from happiness, that she still laughed daily, that she smiled, that she giggled, that even with so many hard things going on in her life, she was still able to find joy. And I think that's something that we should all strive to cultivate in our classrooms. That is a space that joy can be found, and that even in the really high highs and the low lows, that we're never far from a place of hope and joy.